all the best for 2019. I have with me here this week my colleague, the Minister of Works and Transport, Senator Rohan, Sinanan, and I'll pass it straight over to him.
Members of the media and the listening and the viewing audience, I would just like to report on the Curepe Interchange, certain matters with the Curepe Interchange today. You would recognize this morning in the newspaper, there was a front page article in the Express which purported to indicate that the Curepe Interchange construction was the cause of a resident in the area being flooded out. And that was as a result of a ruptured main due to the piling of the at the interchange. The report that I have at the ministry is that that had nothing to do with any piling at the interchange. What it was a ruptured washer air valve that was leaking, and there were some failures on the air valve. It had nothing to do with the piling at the Ministry of Works project, the Curepe Interchange, and it was repaired last night by WASA with assistance from the contractor who is on site. So again, it had nothing to do with any work being done at the interchange. Secondly, I want to just draw your attention to an article again in the Express yesterday, which purported to carry a press conference at the Ministry of Works, where the minister was quoted several times in the article as saying different things on the project. I just want to indicate that at no point in time I was at that press conference. So whatever information was handed out at that press conference, it was by the technical team at the ministry, and they were simply reporting on the process being used for the land acquisition at the Curepe Interchange. At no point in time the minister was present at the press conference. And just to give an update as to where we are, you would recognize earlier this week, or at that press conference, we did indicate that the ministry did sign some of the warrants for possession of to some of the landowners for possession of their lands. That does not stop the negotiation from continuing. Unfortunately, there are some residents and some commentators who are trying to indicate that the government is forcing people to accept the government's valuation. That is not true. There's a process for land acquisition, and the process is simply where we serve Section 3, Section 4. After Section 4, the government has the right to move in on the land, but that does not stop the negotiations from going on. And I'm happy that this morning I got a call that of the 5 landowners that is critical, one of them yesterday agreed to accept the government's offer of the 80% while the negotiation continues. I'm hoping that this good sense will prevail, and before the marshal of the court would enforce the land acquisition, compulsory acquisition process, whereby giving us a vacant possession, that we can have an ample solution to the problem that we may be faced with, where the contractor may be forced to charge for downtime on the project. So I'm just hoping that good sense will prevail, the negotiations will continue, and it will be a satisfactory result for both the landowners and the government on this project. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. The process that Minister Sinanan has outlined is not a new process. The compulsory land acquisition process is a process that is on our books of the laws of Trinidad and Tobago for decades. What it does is it allows a government to proceed with its developmental program. Once it has served certain notices on persons, it allows the government, after evaluation has been provided, to take possession of the land. It protects the landowners. This is very important. As Minister Sinanan said, they can accept up to 80% of the valuation and still dispute with the government the remaining amount of the valuation. But what it allows is a government to take possession of land in accordance with the law to proceed with its developmental program. And it protects all landowners to ensure that they get what is the correct market value of the land. If they have a dispute with the Commissioner of Valuation's valuation, there are processes where they can go to court and dispute it, etc. But there's also a protection process where they will be paid up to 80% of the government's valuation without prejudice to their other rights. At this stage, we'll invite any questions you all may have.
5, who's just agreed. The ministry said really firmly, like, we're taking action, we're going to court, it seemed very firm. Do you believe that you may have bullied these people, or you are bullying these people into giving up their land?
Definitely not. This project started, I think, with 37 parcels. It has come down to just 5 parcels. Most of the residents and the occupiers would have understood the law clearly, where by accepting the commissioner valuation offer of 80% does not prejudice your right to continue your negotiation. I think that was made clear to the attorneys of that person, and they saw the whole concept of the compulsory acquisition, where this does not put them out in any way or jeopardize their options of actually continuing their negotiations with the state to achieve an acceptable figure.
Sorry.
I just want to clarify that one person out of the 5, is that as the last person that was supposed to...
That brings us down now to just 4, and my information is that there was a meeting yesterday, and we're hoping to have some favorable responses coming out of that meeting. It is never in the government interest to have to actually go in and put anybody out of their possessions. That is why we have this Land Acquisition Act, which protects the landowner and also the state. Once the state has to acquire a property in the public's interest.
I will ask that now. Is it, in your opinion, maybe is it time to look at the act again, see if there's any adjustments that can be made? I think back to when we were trying to build the Digger Martin Highway many, many years ago, where one person essentially held up that highway for nearly a decade. Is it time to go back and look at it and make changes, or are you happy with the act?
I think if we follow the act, then it will be fair to everyone. Unfortunately, in the Point 4 San Fernando to Point Fortin Highway, if we had followed the Compulsory Acquisition Act in the form it is in, the taxpayers of this country would have saved hundreds of millions of dollars, because a lot of land was acquired there, a significant amount. Now you recognize that you don't need it, and there are a lot of litigations that is going on there for agreements and arrangement that was made outside the Land Acquisition Act that the state now has to untangle. So the Land Acquisition Act is clear. It is in the interest of both the landowners and the state, and it allows the court to have the final decision on the values if you cannot agree upon a value.
Now I'm curious, what exactly is the state dealing with in terms of the Point Fortin Highway and that land acquisition? Just how much money are we talking extra, you think?
I can tell you, at the ministry we are compiling a full report which will be presented to the cabinet, and from that report then we'll be able to make a statement on the land acquisition on the San Fernando to Point Fortin. But again, I stand by my statement. If we had followed the Compulsory Acquisition Act, which was in place, taxpayers would have saved hundreds of millions of dollars.
Mr. Young, changing gears a little bit, of course, release just came out from the UNC about an hour ago. He might have been in cabinet, but they've asked for a debate in Parliament about the Prime Minister's 2-part address on Sunday and Monday. They want to know how much it cost and just everything that went into it. And the members of the media and the public are also questioning that. What exactly happened? How much went into creating this? Who was invited? When was it filmed? And all of that. Where?
First of all, I haven't seen any release from the UNC because, as you quite rightly assume, we were in cabinet and didn't have access. There are various, under the standing orders, there are various procedures that if the members of opposition want to bring a motion for debate, let them follow that and bring their motion for debate. I actually find it quite surprising and interesting at minimum, the level of the generation of interest that a slightly different presentation by the Prime Minister has created and caused. And it's actually quite a positive thing, because the decision that was taken is to move away from the static standing at a podium type of address to the nation and to do a more interactive presentation with the use of slides, etc. And I dare say it has been quite effective. it seems to me to be an attempt to change the narrative from the facts that were presented by the Prime Minister that have been irrefutable. I think some persons have tried to refute, for example, the drop in income in the energy sector. That's been dealt with. But I'm not hearing from the opposition whatsoever any response to the facts that were put before the nation. All it was simply is a different process, procedure, and presentation style that was used by the Prime Minister. All of his previous addresses to the nation, we've pre-filmed, we've pre-taped. It's been, minor editing, and then it's planned and released to the nation. There's no difference with this one, apart from people are seeing for the first time a presentation. It is also the first time any Prime Minister has been this interactive throughout the whole of his term with the population. So I find it quite remarkable that they want to know who is the audience, where was the audience, etc. It was filmed at Napa. There is always some cost associated with the filming of these things, but again, it is a prime ministerial address to the nation done via a different type of presentation, and that is all that it was. So it was not something that was, I see also one of the television stations, unfortunately, took it upon themselves to claim that this was a paid political program. Absolutely false and incorrect. The Prime Minister, through his stewardship, has done addresses to the nation, sometimes more than once a year. This was his start address to the nation. He took a decision to do a more interactive presentation, and that's all that it was.
Was this done as part of the, I believe it's the Telecommunications Act, which gives the Prime Minister...
Every concessionaire, so every television station, every radio station, etc., every concessionaire who has been granted a license, a concession under the Telecommunications Act of Trinidad and Tobago, yes, there is an obligation to provide a certain amount of time, airtime, free airtime for the government. And that is what was utilized in this case, as previous addresses to the nation were.
Understanding that there's also a clause in that act that says that if that same address takes up, let's say, prime time, where this was, in 7:30 on Sunday, 8 o'clock on Monday, the broadcaster also has the obligation to move it where they see fit so that it doesn't take up, revenue.
It's not under the act. It would be under the concession, the license itself. And then again, at the end of the day, no one was forced to broadcast this. All right, requests were made. Requests are made during the normal course. I mean, I've been in this for 3 years. For 3 years, requests have been made. Not very often. It's a prime ministerial address to the nation. Same thing happens in other jurisdictions when prime ministerial or presidential addresses. President Trump had an address to the nation the other night, etc. Correct, and then it's up to the broadcast stations as to whether they want to broadcast it or not. At no point in time, as far as I'm aware, was there any issue with any of the television stations as to carrying it at the time that had been requested. So there is absolutely nothing that is unusual, absolutely nothing that is abnormal, apart from a fresh approach, a different presentation style by the Prime Minister. And what it was, quite simply, is this is his stewardship as the Prime Minister of the nation, telling the people, this is what the government met, this is what the government has done, and this is what the government intends to do.
That as the Prime Minister, having access to that airtime to give these 2 hours in an election year, you can't forget that, can it be seen as campaigning and an unfair advantage against, let's say, the opposition, who will have, if they want to do the exact same thing, would have to pay for that airtime? No. So is it as an advantage as campaigning or anything like that?
Well, first of all, I don't see why you're drawing the inference that is a political campaign or anything like that. I mean, if the Prime Minister was so any time that the Prime Minister addresses, then you're going to say, because it's an election year, it's a political campaign. It's just a different style was used. If he was there suited in his suit with a tie in front of the lectern here, office of the Prime Minister, etc., would any of these questions be asked? The answer is no. Don't try to change the narrative. At the end of the day, let the opposition deal with the facts that were presented. The opposition has a job to do, so I'm not at all surprised that they would try to raise these issues. I haven't heard any of them from the leader of the opposition come down, address $29 billion in cash. How was it spent? Tell us about the Beetham wastewater plant and all these different types of things. I haven't heard them say anything about the stabilization of the energy industry. the shambles that it was left in, that was a priority for this administration, and out of the office of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister led the charge. I handled many negotiations, and we managed to stabilize the energy industry, which this country needs to survive, even while you work on a diversification plan. So let the opposition come to Parliament, let them raise the questions. There is absolutely nothing to hide. It allows me to make another point. For the first time, a Prime Minister throughout his term has engaged. Tonight there's going to be a conversations with the Prime Minister in Tunapuna, the Exodus Panyard. Again, it's an open event. Anyone is permitted to come there. You tell me when in recent history a Prime Minister, in the middle of the term, you want to call it an election year, but for the last 3 years, he's opened himself in conversations with the Prime Minister to the public, and he will address questions asked, sit down there freely, none of it is staged, etc. That is a level of transparency, as I was pointing out to a reporter a couple of days ago. Also, whenever the Prime Minister travels, and I've been on some travels with him, as soon as we come out of a meeting, go and issue a press release, show who we've met with, say what the meeting was about. And it seems that the country, and in particular the opposition, don't like this level of transparency and accountability. But that is the stewardship of this Prime Minister.
This week, the opposition leader opened or invited the Prime Minister to have a debate. As Communications Minister, are you able to say how likely this or that is possible?
I saw it reported in the media, in the press. You all would recall in an election year, right around a general election, there was a whole debates committee put together, etc., to have a debate between the then Prime Minister, Kamala Persad-Bissessar, and the then leader of the opposition, Dr. Rowley. Dr. Rowley is always fully prepared and open to discuss with anyone or speak with anyone. Ms. Persad-Bissessar backed out on that occasion. If she's serious about a debate, I'm sure her handlers, her people can put it in writing, we could start looking at a structure, etc. Quite frankly, it has not come up for discussion on our side whatsoever, because I don't think she's serious.
Should not rule out that it's possible.
Yeah.
As I've just said, this Prime Minister, look, tonight, I invite you all, come to Tunapuna, come to the Exodus Panyard. This Prime Minister, this is about the 5th or the 6th one he's done. He did one in Tobago recently, he had done one in Aruca, Maloney, Mount Hope, other areas in Trinidad. This Prime Minister is committed to having interactive conversation with the people, and he's there. He's first Prime Minister to go to a joint select committee, you all will recall, with respect to the port and the Cabo Star and the Ocean Flower and those types of things, and expose corruption. So I'm certain that the Prime Minister will not have any problem if there's a properly structured type debate. But I don't think the opposition leader is serious.
The opposition leader showed up at Exodus Panyard today.
Everybody is welcome. We don't stop anybody from coming to it is hosted by the Office of the Prime Minister, hosted by the Prime Minister. His ministers will be there. He normally directs, if a question on something with works and transports comes up, he'll direct it to Minister Sinanan. Something on national security comes up, direct it to me. Legislation, the Attorney General. But the Prime Minister is the host. He sits there, he takes the questions. You all have seen this before. It's going on for 3 years.
Can I change gears? Sorry, you want to follow up with that? I just wanted to change gears. I understand that there's a Sandals press conference supposed to happen today. I don't know if it's happened yet.
I was just getting messaged about that. I don't know where this came from. I don't know if it is the normal or one of the sources of information, it seems. There is no Sandals meeting taking place here today. There is no Sandals press conference taking place here today. So I think that's just a lot of mischief.
There is. You can't say now that you know anything, or you don't know anything about the Sandals falling apart. Or
if there is going to be a Sandals press conference, a Sandals meeting, I suspect there will be one very shortly, because I'm trying to get them here next week. As soon as that is finalized, we will inform the media and let you all know if there's going to be a press conference. Again, use Sandals as the perfect example. Every time we've met with them, we've either put out a press release, or on the last few occasions, Adam Stewart, myself, the CEO, we've done live media conferences after our meetings, etc. And I don't expect anything different.
And when you go back to the conversations with the Prime Minister, what happens after, because this is, as you said, it's a rare occasion where citizens get to converse with the Prime Minister.
Not rare under this administration. He's been doing it consistently.
What happens after those points are raised? Is that government?
Good point. So we actually have persons there. Well, we have the recording, but we also have persons there whose job it is to record the issues being raised. The Prime Minister may very well direct it There and then, for example, Minister of National Security, you've heard what has just been said about a police station in so-and-so area. Please deal with it. Minister of Works and Transport, you've heard what was just said about infrastructure in the area, please. And that's how it's dealt with. But at minimum, there's someone there taking notes, and then afterwards we make sure that whoever's in charge or responsible for the issue raised, it does get to them so they can address it.
I have another question, changing topic again. Is Minister Dennis Moses in Caracas right now for the inauguration of Nicolas Maduro? There was no release from his ministry, as tends to happen from that ministry. There was no... You understand the controversy around essentially going to Caracas for an inauguration when several of our trading partners don't recognize his government. So is it that we are officially saying that we recognize?
Well, we are a sovereign nation, and I mean, yes, you could take the answer from the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs going to represent the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the inauguration today. That speaks for itself. We have consistently said as an administration that we recognize the government of Venezuela, and we stand as a neighbor ready to assist in whatever way we can, etc. So the answer is yes, the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs has gone to the inauguration of President Maduro today, and we continue to have good relations with Venezuela.
An interesting position. We haven't given any formal statement, especially with the Guyana-Venezuela border dispute. So CARICOM sent out the release being firmly in support of Guyana. Are we also part of that? Because CARICOM could say it, but we have never said openly whether we've sided with Venezuela.
I don't think it's for us to side on anything. I think at the end of the day, there are international laws should be respected, etc. If there are dispute between two neighboring countries, Trinidad, under this administration and PNM administrations, our foreign policy is one of non-intervention and non-interference. So we continue to maintain that. If at any point in time we call upon to offer, for example, space to mediate or anything like that, we stand ready to do such things. But we are certainly not going to be the judge and jury with respect to any disputes between our neighbors.
Certain CARICOM nations actually get, in some instance, a slap on the wrist from the U.S. I believe Dominica, they lost their visa waiver, so now Dominicans have to travel to Barbados to get a visa, whereas they could have done before. And people have said that is because of their direct support of the Venezuelan government. Have we been given any such warning about our ties with Venezuela and recognizing them? Or
at the end of the day, as we've said consistently to all of our friends and allies, and the United States is a very good friend and ally of Trinidad and Tobago. We are a sovereign nation. They understand, I believe, because we have had conversations, that we are the closest country to Venezuela, 7 miles away, and therefore what goes on in Venezuela directly affects us. We are a very small nation. We continue to maintain our sovereignty. We're very careful. We have commercial arrangements with Venezuela, and we have commercial arrangements with the United States. At the end of the day, as far as I'm aware, and I'm certain it continues to be so, we have great relations with both countries. Okay. Any other question?
You keep us advised as to Sandals, because we understand that there are Sandals private jets in Tobago.
Well, I don't know how there could be any Sandals private jet. Well, I don't know if there are any Sandals private jets in Tobago. I certainly don't know anything about that. But yes, as soon as the meeting has been confirmed, etc., and if we're going to have a press conference, we will notify you all as we have done in the past. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
This is with Petrotrin and the steel band support. I know there's some anxiety within the 3 bands that Petrotrin used to sponsor. Is there any possibility that Heritage would give them some sort of, support? I know that Mr. Espinay said one is not the other. Petrotrin doesn't flow into Heritage. Any possible chance at all?
Okay, this is something that I'm not familiar with or aware with, but also at my level, we would not get into that level of particularity with the running of Heritage. Remember, there are a number of companies there now. There's Heritage, there's Paria, there's the Petrotrin still exists, so it's there for the legacy items. There's the holding company, Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited, and then there's the company that the refinery is set up in, etc. So those questions are best directed to the board of Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited, Mr. Espinay and his board, or the management of Heritage Parry, etc. I can't answer that. Okay? Yes,
Last
teacher.
question. I just follow up. You said that there was a cost attached to the Napa broadcast.
No, I said there's always a cost associated with the filming of certain things and this type of thing. I don't have I don't have those figures, but it's not something that I'm sure once there's a cost involved, we would be able to provide that information.
Today, is that being broadcast live across all 3 stations as well?
Again, it is going to be covered by TTT, as you would expect. Requests were made of the other television stations, but again, it's a request, it's not a demand, so it's up to them as to whether they carry it or not. What I can tell you is if we decide to rebroadcast it, then we enter into commercial arrangements with the television stations and we buy the time, as we always do. Some of these stations have reached out to me as Minister of Communication, wanting to meet to discuss future advertising going forward, etc. Not a problem. I had a meeting earlier this week with, I believe, the President and Vice President of the Trinidad and Tobago Publishers and Broadcasters Association. Went very well. So I am open to meeting with the media and also to have those types of discussions with respect to commercial arrangements going forward. Okay, thank you all very much. I appreciate it.